Yes, good morning and welcome back to This Morning on ITV. We are cruising on the wing of nationalism and you this morning. I am your host, EBENEZER OYETAKIN, and we will be taking a look at a topical issue, politics of bitterness. How do we address it? More so that we are racing towards 2023 general elections. With me to take a look at this topic in the house is Miss SWAT DUNIYA. She is a lawyer, a broadcast journalist. SWAT DUNIYA, I return to you in the characteristic of this program as one of our ritual, nationalism, and you.
It is my duty and responsibility to build my nation.
Very well. We are community of nation builders.
Good morning, by the way.
Good morning. You're welcome to our
studio. And the name is SWAT, not Swati.
I pronounce it in Swahili.
Oh, yeah. Okay, that is allowed.
You're welcome.
It's okay.
Very well.
Yes.
Politics of bitterness. As a journalist and a lawyer and as observer in Nigeria political processes.
Yes.
For these 22 years, we have witnessed a lot of that.
Indeed.
Is it abating?
I don't think so. I think it's getting worse by the day because when you trace the history of politics,
I want you to analyze for the benefit of our onlookers.
Exactly, that's what I'm trying to do.
What is bitterness in politics? How will you? What are the manifestations?
You know, I don't want to go too technical, but I think politics or bitterness in politics is not something that we need to be very technical about. It's just the way politicians pitch themselves against each other and also use very primordial sentiments to find their way into the corridors of power. By all means, it doesn't matter if people die. It doesn't matter if they whip up sentiments of tribalism. It doesn't matter if they go against each other, as fellow politicians, kill, maim, use thugs, and all forms of, going the lowest. That for me is bitterness when it comes to politics, and that's not how it ought to be. Because when you look at the Nigerian political, landscape, tracing it back in, from the 60s, where we had the likes of Nnamdi Azikiwe, we had the likes of Tafawa Balewa, Ahmadu Bello, and Azikiwe. Of course, we know how the NC was led by Azikiwe. We also know how, the AG was led by, what do you call him? Obafemi Awolowo, and we also had Sir Ahmadu Bello. We saw how they collaborated, just shortly before Nigeria got our independence. We saw a collaboration of the NC alongside with the Northern Coalition Party, and then we
Northern People's Congress.
NCP, and then somehow we saw how Tafawa Balewa was the Prime Minister, and then we saw how Nnamdi Azikiwe was the Governor General. Somehow, when you look at the politics, one would say, yes, it was pitched against the regions as at then. But then what these people were focused on basically was the development of their people, the development of their region. They had agendas, development agendas. But looking at how politics moved on, we moved gradually to the 1966 coup, and then things started dabbling up. And I don't know how they got it wrong, but somehow I think Nigerian politicians understood the gullibility of Nigerians, sorry to say that, and they have used those sentiments to keep on whipping or pitching the people against each other. And unfortunately today, it has gotten so bad. We've seen, assassination attempts. We've seen all sort of diabolical things being played in politics, which is not supposed to be so.
Now, taking it from there, this is 22 years of our democracy. In those days, we used to say nascent democracy, but 22 years, daughter will also be preparing to get married by now.
Definitely.
And so why is it that we do not appear to be learning, and therefore solemnly dousing these tensions of bitterness away?
That's because we've lost the focus in politics. When you go to develop climes where politics is played the way it ought to be, like I said, it should be issue-based politics, politics with ethics, politics with ideology. But is that what the politicians here are concerned? Because over time, I think the people permitted this, in the sense that politics has taken a different dimension. I try to trace it from back then, where we had issue-based politics, where the leaders were more concerned about the people and, you know, what are the issues? How do we solve this? How do we bring about development to our people? But over time, it has turned to become a thing that is based on self-gratification. And that's why I think it's really very hard, because once a man gets to that point where it's all about me, my political ambition, I have to get to power by all means, it's not about the people, I don't care, I'm going to kill anybody, then it becomes really hard. So I think we've gotten to that place where it is so difficult for these politicians to remove themselves out of the picture of how politics ought to be played and what politics should be about. You know, they are more focused on themselves. And they keep amassing. You know, like I'm a journalist and I go on air to, you know, I remember Mr. Tom Adaba said sometimes he feels that some of these politicians need to be psychologically evaluated, because a situation where you just want to keep on amassing yourself, then it tells you that there's a problem somewhere. So where we are right now, I'm very optimistic, because if you trace the history of other countries, you know, Ghana used to be like that. So many other countries used to be like that. But over time, we've seen reformations come in, with people coming in, the likes of Lee Kuan Yew, who came in and said, you know what, there's rot in this system, but we will make it work. So I think it just takes a visionary, a nationalist, someone who understands the ethics of politics and who has a love for this country to say, well, I'm going to take the lead in doing this and do it differently.
In your opinion, what are the implications, okay, generally speaking, what are the implications of bitterness in politics to the polity and to governance?
Of course, it's very obvious. Underdevelopment, that's one of the basic things, and I think that is what's our bane right now in this country. There's no development, because if self is the focus, if the needs of the people is not put into consideration, if development is not at the back of the mind of the politician who uses that. And you know, one thing they don't realize, that this is a means to an end. It is a platform whereby you ought to, you know, get to take care of the needs of the people so that you leave lasting legacies. So underdevelopment, rancor, killings, confusion, basically I think the major impact is underdevelopment. A country that has politics of bitterness can never get to that point where they will have a breakthrough in terms of developing. It would always remain at this point where we're referred to as either a third world country. We're running around looking for donors. We don't have adequate resources because it is being pilfered by people who want to use these very resources rather than for the development of the people for their own personal gains.
Many Nigerians have alluded to the fact that the bitterness in politics, the selfishness and meism in politics, and all of that goes with it, are some of the reasons that led to the security challenges we are contending with. Do you share this view?
I do.
Why so?
Because when you are not focused on what is important, the security and welfare, because that's what government exists for, you're busy fighting political opponents. You're busy thinking, while you should be in the business of governance, you're thinking of the next 4 years. You're thinking, okay, who is it that is against me? Let me see how I'm able to arm this dog so that they will intimidate. This insecurity we're facing in Nigeria, if you trace the history, you will find out that it's the politicians themselves. Let's look at the case of Boko Haram. What is the history of Boko Haram? Boys were armed. Let's take care of these political opponents. Let's intimidate them. And then somehow, after the politics was done and probably you found your way to power, you forgot that you have already armed some people who are helpless, who are jobless, and so they would metamorphose into monsters. And that's exactly how it started with Boko Haram. The bandits, somehow there is a theory, moving around that, yes, some politicians also have a hand in that because of some little benefits here and there, because of some sentiments here and there. So all of these things cannot be taken away from this politics of bitterness, So the more we continue in this terrain, honestly, the more this problem of insecurity, poverty, underdevelopment will continue to persist.
Someone once said that almost all the senators, not just these ones that are there today, all the members of House of Reps, all governors, including those that are even appointed as ministers, that at one time or the other, preponderant of them have political thugs that are armed. And as you know, now we have had changes of powers, and as you vote out some, they becomes unable to take good care of this political liability they inadvertently created in the name of thugs.
Yes.
And these thugs have come to form armies of nuisance and the rest of it. And some even said politicians that are voted out of power were housed their own thugs in the bush as a way of cornering, or that is why we have kidnapping and the rest of it and all that goes with it. Your take?
That's the theory around. I mean, I may not necessarily come out and say this is exactly the truth, but like they always say, behind every permutation, rumors, there is an element of truth. I mean, we have seen these things happen over the years. So it is not something that anyone will be surprised. I'm sure if you go and take a poll among Nigerians with this theory that you've brought out, you find out that majority of Nigerians will totally agree. Because we know the sort of politicians that we have in our own political space, and we know what their mindset is. It's all about winning at all costs. And let me just add one thing to this discussion. I think another thing that encourages this politics of bitterness is the winner takes it all mentality that we have in this country. I was reading some times back, there was one time Ethiopia went on election, and after the election, we saw a sort of dialogue opened by the prime minister who was elected. He called his opponent, you know what, let's sit down on a round table. Let's talk about how we can bring about developments to this country. What do we need to do? We're open, our ears are open. I mean, the only time we ever saw that was when President Yar'Adua was elected, you remember, where he made a call, but we didn't even eventually see. Because the politicians on the other side in our country would rather not have anything to do with the present government. Immediately you get into power, the other one sees you as an enemy rather than a partner in progress. And that's why I'm saying this politics of bitterness continue to subsist, because Nigerian politicians don't see an avenue to get into politics to serve the people. It is about amassing wealth. It is about their self-gratification and a whole lot of things. So going to the extent of arming thugs, of keeping them, of feeding them just to ensure that they protect them, they fight off anybody who dares to stand up against them, well, it's not something that I would say it's not true. Because we are Nigerians, we live in this country, we see how, the politics of bitterness has been operative for years on ending. So, yeah, I would want to go with that.
Taking a look at just concluded Anambra State election, and the almost tragedy of almost assassinating the current winner, Professor Soludo, during which 3 of his armed policemen, security forces were killed, and the rest of it. And taking into consideration that this is 22 years of our democracy, do you see any sign that we are learning and we have a determined purpose to right this wrong?
We have politicians who may most likely not be given the chance, who have this sort of mindset that you talk about. But the truth is, how do we get them to come on board? How do we get to open the doors for them to come into elective positions. That's the problem, because another thing, that is rife with the Nigerian political scene is the fact that politics is so difficult. So that people who have good intentions, who are visionaries, who are nationalists, who are patriotic, and who can help bring about the change that we need in these countries are incapacitated. Somehow they are unable to have the wherewithal in terms of financial muscle, to come into the scene and play politics as it ought to. So that's the problem that I think we have in this country, whereby those set of people, you find them, it's either they do not have the capacity because it's so difficult, they don't have the financial muscle, or they are very nonchalant. They say, well, you know what, I don't want to have anything to do with politics. So that's the problem. But I believe that if we can open up the space where, for example, we have independent candidacy, that's one thing I know that many people have been canvassing for, and asking that in our constitutional amendment that provision should be made for an independent candidate. Maybe when we have that, and when the political parties begin to bring down on some of the bottlenecks in terms of monetary obligation.
We are cruising on the wing of nationalism, and we are being joined on this crucial issue of unhealthy political rivalries, politics of bitterness, by Mr. Farouk Adejo Audu, a politician and himself a journalist. You are welcome. And in the characteristic of nationalism, we say nationalism and you, Mr. Farouk.
It is my singular responsibility to build this country.
You're very welcome.
Thank you very much.
And you watching us at home, imbibe that spirit. No one will do it for us. Yes. Unhealthy rivalries in politics, politics in bitterness. In your view, is it abating after 22 years? Have you seen it receding?
Well, politics of bitterness in Nigeria, with all due respect to the practitioners of politics in this country, I would rather suggest that it is escalating.
And why so?
Well, you have to look at the fundamental issues that bring about bitterness in politics. And it will appear as if from the on-go, our politics have been bedeviled with a lot of variables that has rendered it to be a game of chance. Number one, ethnicity. Number two, religion. And the most fundamental one, actually, is the process that throws off leadership in Nigeria. The process of election or the process of selection. Okay? When people go for election, number one, they go with all sorts of sentiments. Of course, there is this pretense about, yes, I'm going to develop, I'm going to bring infrastructure, I'm going to bring that. But most of us know that in this country, when people run for election, the ticket they are running on is either religion, is either ethnicity, or one interest or the other. And what may influence the vote of a particular candidate may not even be performance. It is not, in most cases, that is not the reason. Now, the man who gets to office based on sentimental values, the first thing he tries to do is to appease and pander to those interests that brought him into office. And the moment he begins to do that, the other people will feel left out. And the moment they feel left out, the next thing they think of is how to undermine that government.
But taking it from your rider, it so seems that rather than the religious sentiment, because nothing deprives you from practicing your religion as you should, nothing deprives me from practicing mine as I should, and things of that nature. Then the ethnicity, the ethnics are what we are, and the rest of it. Now, rather than blaming it on the ethnicity, religions, and the rest of it, isn't it much more blamable on the politicians that are playing it up?
The truth is that there is no society that can rise above itself. Every member of society is influenced by that society. Okay? In a society where ethnicity and religion and all sorts of fringe sentiments base sentiments are strange. If you bring it, it will not work. It will just not work. If, for instance, you go to maybe you go to where you have in most schools in Nigeria, for instance, you know, most of these sentiments begin when people,
you know, because why I throw that up is that I relate with Nigerians, both from the north, various religions and the rest of it.
Yes.
And when we come in contact with one another, the religious thing does not come up in our face first, and the rest of it. Why is it that when we get into politics is when it is loud?
It doesn't. Because you see, politics is a true reflection. It is possible to pretend about a lot of things. If you're going into service, I mean, it's an enshrined thing. It's an enshrined thing in our constitution. You're going, if you're looking for appointment in Nigeria, they talk of state, they talk of tribe, they talk of also religion, they talk of all sorts of things. It doesn't happen in most other civilized countries.
What is your take on this?
It doesn't. So it's an enshrined thing. You can't run away from it.
It's an instrument, you know. The politicians have found a way of using that to manipulate the people. You know, like he said, they ask you, what state are you from? And then you want to pitch the north against the south against the east, and telling them that, you know what, if these people get into power, your interest is not going to be preserved. He's a Christian, she's a Muslim, you know. So all of these things, and I don't know why the people, you know, allow themselves to get carried away, knowing fully well that we all go to the same market, we all want the same country. What you as the Igbo man or Yoruba man and the Hausa man, you want the same thing. You want good roads, you want potable water, you want to be able to feed your family. So I think that's element of sentiment. I don't know why it comes in, and if the people do not allow that to be an influencing factor, then it will not, because we can see people united. For example, you go to countries like America, even though, I mean, they've also had their own fair share of divisive politics. I mean, the last election, we saw how that happened. But I think it's something that the politicians use, and because the people allow it, they see that as a very strong weapon which they use in terms of politicking to divide the people. They call it the divide and rule syndrome, and so they use that, and then they come into power, and then the people just get to realize that, in fact, it didn't just make sense.
Sometimes, going back from where you started from, I'm coming to you now. Some times ago, Dr. Nnamdi Azikiwe was even more accepted in the Southwest than Chief Obafemi Awolowo.
Exactly.
Before the Action Group political party came in and the rest of it. And the same thing, Sadauna and the rest of it, they were all trans-regional and they were accepted. Isn't this a kind of, what do you call it? Isn't this a kind of questionable, questioning the character and the content of the kind of people we are having as politicians today? Is it not speaking to their lack of inner content, leadership content, that is prerequisite for genuine good leadership?
Well, you see, I like to make some slight amendment or less correction to what you said. The truth of the matter is that ethnic politics started with those people you just called. Dr. Azikiwe, Chief Obafemi Awolowo, and Ahmadu Bello. Azikiwe, yes, he pioneered, sort of, he was a trailblazer in national politics. When, as an Igbo man in Lagos, he was able to, in the West, he was able to go, to be elected there without sentiments and all that. But the moment he started feeling challenges, and the challenges came from Awolowo, and Awolowo's challenge to Azikiwe was not on ideology or on anything, it was on ethnicity. And the moment those challenges came, Azikiwe ran back to the east. And he said he was being persecuted because he was from the east. I'll refer you to one book. The book is called Ethnic Politics in Nigeria by Professor Unole. Ethnic Politics in Nigeria. That is directly blamed Azikiwe, Awolowo, and Ahmadu Bello. Ahmadu Bello had never pretended to be a nationalist before. At no time did he pretend to be a nationalist. At no time.
I disagree with you on that, because I read one of his statements where he said, where he said that we should not bury our differences, but we should acknowledge them so that we can use them to marry ourselves. Paraphrasing.
Well, from what I know and understand,
yes,
the man was a northerner. he worked and toiled for the unity of the North. Okay.
But sir, let me come in here.
Okay.
You remember I made reference to this
yes.
Azikiwe. Yes, I mean the peculiarity of the politics back then in the 60s, where you had the Nnamdi Azikiwe, the Awolowos, and the Sardanas of this world. Of course, they were regional leaders.
Yes.
But what was their focus? What was the sort of politics that they played for the development of their region?
Of their regions, yes.
It was not. You would not find an Awolowo, for example, going to say, and Nnamdi Azikiwe is this and that and that. Do you understand? That's the difference of the sort of politicians that we have now.
Of that, bro.
I do not have a politics.
They were not directly
I do not mind
No, they were
to have
acrimonious.
They were acrimonious. Of course, they had their issues.
They were acrimonious.
Okay, let us go in this way. Okay, let us go in this way. Let us go in this way.
Sentimental.
Is political leadership not about righting the wrong of society and providing good environment for development? Why have we not learned? How many years thereafter? We can't continue to blame those people in the past. Let us now come into our democratic timeline. 22 years of democracy. What have we done to right this wrong and to create a sublime environment where politics of service triumph over politics of meism and selfishness?
Yes, you see, there have been efforts over time to conquer the politics of sentiments in Nigeria. If you remember, right from the Second Republic, it was almost mandatory that a party that can win election must have national outlook. That is when you saw the coalition of forces from across the divides. Okay, getting back to even Babangida's transition, it was obvious that you must have an office in every state of the federation. You must have this, you must have that. There have been conscious efforts to try to defeat it. But unfortunately, we have been unable to discard the foundation that we took from time. Like my sister was saying, a lot of people find it very easy to go back and manipulate the people on the basis of sentiment rather than issues, because it pays them well. And you see, you must agree that in politics, just like in most other human endeavors, people think of their interests first, no matter how they pretend. No matter how they pretend that it's the general interest, it's the general good that they are pursuing, they think of their interest first. Now, is it going to be easy for me to win if, for instance, I'm from Kogi State? I'm looking for governorship, for instance, and I'll go to my part of Kogi State and I say, look, you see, you guys have to bury all. I'm just talking. I mean, I'm talking. You have to bury all the differences. These other people are our brothers. Those other people are our brothers, and this and that and that and that and that and that. Don't vote for me because I'm an Igala man. Vote for me because I'm a Kogite. Yes, it's good message. Yes. It's good message.
Okay.
But the man who is contesting with me, who possibly speaks the same language with me, and goes to the same people and say, look, these other people are cheating us. These other people are doing this. These other people are doing that. When I become governor, all these places, you are all going to have El Dorado. We are going to turn this to that. Which message you appeal to them more? Now, if that becomes the case, you now discover that the environment will now shape your politics. Because you are in it to win, sir. With all due respect, you are in it to win. So even if you have the sentiments that are altruistic, that is the sentiment that you want to carry everybody along, you are the tribalizer, you are all that. The first is you win first. When you win, you now go back there and practice it. Okay? I worked for a governor whose policy was that everything, if he's doing 10 boreholes in this local government, he will spread it across every other local government. If he's giving 10 classroom blocks to one local government, he will spread it across all other local government.
Some people say that the largesse in government, the remunerations to politicians are inducement for this kind of unhealthy political rivalries. Do you share this view?
Well, it's not far-fetched from it, because they are so very buoyant and the people are getting poorer and poorer every day. The gap is so wide, and I think that's the reason why the people avail themselves to this sort of sentiments that he's talking about. You know, you see somebody who comes into the community, he comes with a lot of money and probably shares some 1,000, 5,000 naira, and then he tells you things, he whips up the sentiments and makes it look like I'm on your side. of course, the people would naturally go with a person like that. That's someone who comes in and is talking about, let us try and see ourselves as one. So yes, because the gap is widened every day in terms of poverty, and that's why they keep saying, the rich are getting richer and the poor are getting poorer. So remuneration indeed is a big factor, and I think that's also what makes the politicians go against themselves, because you know that once you get into that political office, you know that you have this allowance, you have the ability to fly to different countries. In fact, the opportunities are endless. So that's why they would want to fight anyone they perceive as an opponent, even if it means to kill and maim, even if it means to hire thugs and do all sorts of diabolical things just to get into that office, because it is all about self-interest, the remuneration, the rewards that come to me as a person. Indeed, I know what my brother here is talking about, that you can try and, because yes, of course, we can't deny the fact that I'm into politics because I want to win. I have an agenda, and so I have to get there for me to unfold my agenda. So first of all, yes, the way to getting into office, for me, if you ask me, it's not about divide and rule. I mean, there are better ways. People get more creative every day. The ethics of politics is there. We should not forget about that,
Now, recognizing this as a challenge, that should be tamed, knowing that anyone who comes through divide and rule, maiming, thuggery into power, cannot effectively serve the society, but serve the interest that manipulated him to power. Taking all of this into consideration, as a practicing politicians, what will you advise that we should tame these elements?
You see, if we have to tell the truth to ourselves, okay? I want to talk about remuneration, but let me take the one you have asked. If we have to tell the truth to ourselves, we need nothing short of a revolution. It doesn't have to be a violent revolution to correct the structure that we now have in politics. Okay? You're going for election, no matter your message, you cannot go without overwhelming funds, lots of money to go for election. I was a local government chairman, and I knew how much it cost me to be local government chairman.
I was coming to that. Let me put it to you so that you can put it take it all together.
Yes.
The political party, as the owner of instrument of governance, because they are the one that are given to form government when they win an election. As political parties, are they doing enough? Are they not actually instigating this unhealthy rivalry, whereby you want to be a senator, they tell you that the minimum you should bring, you should buy your form and the rest of it, those humongous amount to buy from local government chairman to the senator, to the presidency, as a matter of fact, you will be talking about billion, including governor. Are the political parties not the problem?
Well, you see, I
want you to take it together. Yes.
I said nothing short of a revolution will correct the issues that we have in our body politics right now. But you see, a lot of most of the things we talk about, there are pros and cons. You can justify it. You can find the merits and the demerits. The political parties, yes, the money they charge, they actually, as a matter of fact, make it impossible for honest people to bring in their money. The money that you need to run for election, the remuneration you get from that election, from office, cannot offset your election bill. Let's face the truth in Nigeria. It will not offset it. We talk about attractive remuneration. The official remuneration, the statutory remuneration, okay, determined by the Revenue Mobilization and Fiscal Commission. If you go by that, it is not outrageous. It is not outrageous. It's the perks of office that is outrageous. And now, why do people go for these perks of office? The cost of getting into office. The cost of getting into office. And why is it that it is people who want to go for perk of office that are attracted to that place? Because the honest people who have honest resource cannot go and employ it into it. You want to go and do a governor in my state now, I know that before you can do governor, you are talking of billions. You understand? To win primary elections, to campaign, to do all that, you are talking of billions. You are talking of billions to become a governor. You are talking of billions. I mean, you are talking of hundreds of millions to become a senator.
Honestly, on this topic, we can spend the whole day.
Yeah. So, but who do you attract?
Let me come back. Let me come back to madam.
Exactly, yes.
What would be your advice to our politicians regarding this issue of unhealthy rivalry and?
Well, who am I to advise the politicians? They are politicians.
They are watching you. They know this is a concern for all Nigerians.
The truth is, I think politicians need to have some sort of conscience, to know that this politics of bitterness has not taken us far. Like I was saying earlier on, one thing that politics of bitterness brings about is underdevelopment. The people don't get the dividends of democracy because everybody is at strife. They are against themselves. They are pitching the people against each other. And when you have a country that is filled with rife, underdevelopment pervades. And that's why poverty persists and a whole lot of things that are quite, unpalatable in our country. So we would urge that the politicians should please be nationalistic in their outview. Before
I shut you up, it so appears that the bill for direct democracy is intended to address some of these things, to shift power to the people. Do you agree with that?
Well, I think it's a good idea, even though
that's direct primaries.
Direct primaries. I think it's a good idea. I think it's the best form, even though the political parties complain of how capital intensive is going to be. But I think it is the best. Let the people's will prevail.
Our politician and journalists take it all together.
Okay, thank you very much. Number one, the other issue is what do we do about
to correct it? What do we do to correct this, since we recognize it as a challenge?
There are several issues. We don't have time. But number one, there is this syndrome of winner takes all. Okay? If that syndrome can be addressed, it was attempted in 1999. This is what we call government of national unity. But at the end of the day, it broke down. Why did it break down? Because Obasanjo went to all the parties and brought in people into government. Now, at the end of the day, those people turned against their own parties. Do you understand? Bola Ige, Obula, for a lot of people that were brought in to government so that every other party can have a sense of belonging, so that acrimony and the policy of business can be reduced. At the end of the day, he failed because parties that were now scared of contributing people to participate. And in any case, by 2003, the PDP felt that it was already well grounded, that he didn't need to do that. Okay, and continued for 16 years until he got down. Now these people came too, and I mean, you see, it's a policy of winner takes all. You discover that everything that is done is discriminatory. I'll give you an example. This social welfare net thing that they are doing.
Yes.
Go to any state. It is APC membership register that is the qualification to collect those money.
I am not aware of that.
I am telling you this. That is APC members that collect it. No PDP, you are identified as a PDP member, you cannot access
because it. I learned that in Abia State, which is a PDP state, yes, the social, what do you call it? Interventions program is going there. And the governor had even spoken out.
Well, I don't know of Abia State. I know of my state. But I do know that the people who control those funds in those states are APC people. And they are basic this of recruitment. But apart from that, we even go back as high as the president. Okay? Corruption is evil in Nigeria. Right from the Obasanjo to Jonathan to Buhari, they target opponents.
Exactly.
If you are corrupt, obviously corrupt, manifestly corrupt, and you are a friend, nothing happens to you.
Once you cross over,
the examples are too there. We shouldn't call names. The examples are too there. From Obasanjo's time to when Jonathan came, the person they started hunting was Ibori. Yes, Ibori. Yes, he has been convicted by several courts to be corrupt man.
Would you say those who are evidently corrupt and the government go against them, it is considered as target? Are we not being
very correct? Very correct, yes, to go against them. But those who are evidently corrupt,
yes,
some of them are actually in court. You either go and enter a nolle prosequi and withdraw the prosecution, or you even let them go. So what message are you sending?
Exactly.
That is good, is okay to be corrupt.
Now, let us not deviate from the topic.
No, point I'm making, it goes down to bitterness. Okay. It goes down to the bitterness. That, okay, these people are targeting, I sit down and I see somebody from my area or somebody from my party that is being locked up, his harass is taken here and there, okay, just because, of course, he's corrupt, I agree. You understand? But I now see another person who has done worse things.
But again, let me take you on that. Let me take you on that. Do you know that the Nigerian people, that is we the common people, we have this characteristic of when they caught a thief, no matter how big the thief is and how much evidence about it, we say they have caught our own thief. Then we pledge allegiance to that thief and we begin to speak against the authority that caught them.
And that was what I was saying. The people
Exactly.
are a willing to. The people are a willing to.
The people are willing to.
They are willing
The people are willing to.
So
that's why
the society also have their thieves and they celebrate their thief, and the rest of it they confer a word on their thieves.
You see, if followership, I mean, if leadership is right, fundamentally, there's no way followership will not be right. If leadership sets the example of catching the thief that belongs to you and leaving his own thief. So when you catch my own thief, why should I not complain?
Exactly.
Thank you very much. We have been discussing politics of unhealthy rivalry in Nigeria, and we want it to come to an end. I have been talking with Mr. Farouk Adejo Audu, a journalist and a politician. Thank you for being our guest today, and we hope when we have the reasons to beckon on you again, you will make yourself available to us. Also, we've been talking with Miss SWAT.
Thank you.
DUNIYA.
Thank you for having me.
A lawyer and a broadcast journalist.
Yes.
You are most welcome.
Thank you very much.
Yes, politicians, you have heard us. Our political leaders, let us tame politics of unhealthy rivalry, because if we engage in politics of unhealthy rivalries, we will be underdeveloping the nation, and that cannot be divorced on the reasons why our refineries are not working 22 years into politics, and why we continue to pay exorbitant rates at subsidies and things of that nature. Let us embrace politics of service. Don't change the channel, as we are coming on the second discussion segment.